Welcome to the Whitetail Canucks panel video. Paul Chapman joined by Patrick Johnson. If you like these videos, if you like our podcast, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, download, give us a rating. They're doing very well, Patrick.
Great.
Kind of like the Canucks.
Oh.
Better than expected?
Better than expected, yeah. The videos are definitely better than expected.
Well, I'm not sure about that. The team, though, back from the All-Star break and an extended break after that, ready to get into action and swing into a 4-game road string in Colorado.
Yeah.
A big game for them.
All games are big now.
Yeah, if you consider the playoffs a goal, big game.
Absolutely. And the Chases, still got 7 teams for 2 spots, essentially. 3 spots if you want to count the third place position in the Central. But yeah, every game's huge. Colorado obviously is a team that the Canucks are in that fight with. Every game right now is realistically a 4-pointer because you need all those points, especially against those teams that you're fighting against. Side note, by the way, there were way fewer 3-point games. We're not really sure why, but there's been a trend. There's way fewer 3-point games. So it's not like you're having that slow incremental bleed or slow incremental acceleration. It's everything counts, and also all these games are getting settled right off the bat.
If I look at this, you talk about all these teams fighting for the playoff spots. So many of them in a different bucket, right? Like I would say Colorado are in the same bucket as Edmonton, where you need to make the playoffs. Okay, you've had enough years of collecting young potential talent. Fans are restless. They really want to see a playoffs fight and or games. I'm not suggesting Canuck fans aren't restless. We know they are, but there does seem to be this is a bonus. Like we're happy where the team is. We're happy for them to be playing meaningful games now, but it's not, oh my God, we're not making the playoffs. This is terrible.
No, it's definitely, there's a feeling of progress. I think people are feeling like, they're going uphill. Yeah, you're right. A playoff chase is a bonus at this point. I think this is a sense there where there's, it's not so much about the destination yet. It's about the fact they're even on the road. And there's totally been a buzz, I would say, around the team. Obviously, there's the Pettersson effect, which has had a huge impact both on and off the ice, I think, in terms of how the team's playing, how the team's being discussed. Lots of work to do, and there's lots of stuff left to build around this team, both in the short term and the long term. But yeah, it's definitely a case where this team feels like they're going in the right direction, as opposed to, say, Edmonton, who have the best player in the world, but don't know what else to do with themselves. I think that's an absolutely great point.
I am fascinated by this trade deadline, the way things have come down. Now you go back to the Roberto Luongo, my contract sucks press conference, where there was this dance, the Leafs are going to get him, the Leafs are going to get him. The Leafs had this gaping hole in the blue line, and everyone said Edler, Tanev, Hutton, Goodbranson, for those really wishful thinkers. People thinking that this was a natural trading partner. Okay, so the Leafs go out this week. They set the market high. They get Jake Muzzin. They may or may not want more people there yet. I was talking to Mike Trakos, national hockey writer, on the Off the Post podcast this week. He was suggesting he thinks all the Canadian teams are going to be in, at least trying to make a big deal. Where do you see this happening? You've talked to Benning.
I think... Yeah, they're not ruling anything out. I mean, Benning's made it pretty clear. He's not looking to move young players. They're not looking to make that sort of we're in a playoff push type trade. At the same time, he's clearly hesitant to move out a guy like Alex Edler, even if there is sort of long-term value in that. They recognize the challenges, I think, in terms of depth that they do have on defense. They do need to find more guys. They're hopeful about Quinn Hughes. They're hopeful about Ollie Levy. But, in the end, you want more guys, and they know that Edler's a sure thing for this season, hopefully for next year, hopefully for the year after that. So that's the kind of weird dynamic there, and I've written about that a fair bit. I think like Trakos is right. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting things happening, and I do think the Canucks are going to sit there and go, in the big picture, they want to add a scoring winger, for instance. They'd be smart to wait until the summer. But you look at how things have gone, and if you're smart about it, you can do a lot of things at once. I mentioned in my story today about the San Jose Sharks in 2013, who were in the middle of it, still considered essentially a playoff contender, and still made a bunch of trades that were focused at the future, and they still even brought guys in. There was real churn in their lineup, and if there's one thing we've seen certainly this year is that there is an interest in having some churn in the roster. They've already made 3 trades. They've moved guys out. They're going to give opportunities to some other players. You'd think that they'd like to maybe find a space for Zach McEwen. Maybe is there something they can do with one of their depth forwards. I think there's space there. There's logical, not huge steps to be made that are available that are, I think, in the big picture, quite easy for the Canucks.
So again, one of the things that I find just absolutely enthralling as we head into this trade deadline is there's so many teams that look like they have a significant move to make. And you hear names like Mark Stone for the Canucks in the summer, but if you're Ottawa and you know these guys aren't resigning, Ottawa has a bunch of them, not just Stone, you're the worst team in the NHL. Like, why not start to move those guys out? And should the Canucks look to be buying a player now to get the jump on a re-signing him? I'm not suggesting they're in on a guy like Panarin either, but Panarin's another guy that Columbus is looking. There's been pretty clear he's not going to re-sign. Do you get something for him now? I think there's a tremendous advantage for a GM who wants to make the so-called bold move.
I think the challenge is what do you actually have to move out?
Wow.
And
there is that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're already saying you're not going to move any of your young players, well, that, I mean, that was obvious. It's not like there's a ton of young talent on the Canucks as it is, but there's guys coming up in the minors. That means you believe in the guys in the minors. You're not necessarily moving anybody there. You're hosting the draft this year. I think the optics, even alone, of just trading your own draft picks seem...
Well, even a second or third round, right?
You want more picks. Because you want to be up there as many times as possible in front of your hometown team. So that makes things difficult. And then, there are a few pieces in the lineup. We've already mentioned them. Guys like Edler, guys like Tanev, guys like Branson, that teams could be interested in saying that's a player we want to move. But I'm not sure on its face any one of those trades really gets you one of those guys, because all those moves have eyes for the future, right? Ottawa's not going to, Ottawa wants young players. They're not going to...
I just think it's all connected. You're going to look at Edmonton. What are Calgary going to do, right? You're seeing these teams in the Canucks division, and everyone seems to have a bigger agenda.
Yeah.
Like, there's teams at the bottom, like in LA. You've got, a team like Edmonton, precarious position in Calgary, maybe looking to push themselves over the top. I think there's business there if you want to do business.
And I do think, actually, there's a name that we haven't talked a whole lot about, but Sam Gagner could be a factor in this. He's obviously playing well with the Marlies in Toronto. He's in the AHL. He did well with the Canucks. He was only in 7 games, but he did well enough that I've got to think there's a team out there that thinks, hey, that's a guy that we could put on our fourth line, run on the power play. He'll give us a little extra scoring depth. And you know what? If the Canucks can move him, they're probably getting a pick back, because he's a player that right now, doesn't fit with what they want to do, but he could help somebody else.
Well, and we see the reaction here. If the Canucks even get a 6th-round pick, people think it's Christmas. One last thing before we go. The schedule. Now, if you don't follow Patrick on Instagram, you should. It's first year on the beat. He's got a great Instagram account, Patty J on the Road, which takes you through the press box food, the sights, the weather of everywhere he goes. But it has been a weird year. I know the World Juniors, it was only a small tournament, but this team, again, they come back off this massive break, and they're headed out on the road for 4 games. They do have, obviously, a glut of home games coming up, but March is crazy when you look one more month down the road.
17 games.
17 games in the month. So how has this schedule been for the Canucks, and is this,
I think,
why did it end up so bad?
Yeah, it's, I mean, part of it, like you said, there was that sort of, they had to be out of the building for 2 weeks, so that kind of defined everything. The early games were interesting because one of the things that, I heard essentially was that because Edmonton was in Europe to start the season, that sort of took out the idea of an Eastern team making a Western swing, that nobody really wanted to come play Calgary, Vancouver, and then have to have some other second trip just to go to Edmonton. Yeah. So there's some logistics
to that. Blame them.
Can't really blame,
Minus 20 something.
Who wants to go to Edmonton in February? So
Or March.
So the Canucks...
October.
Yeah, the Canucks kind of were a bit of the victims of that. They did have this crazy... they played 2/3 of their road games in the first half of the season. So, the run out to the season actually isn't so bad. This is the last long trip they have. They only have a couple other trips after that, but they're all, sort of 4 or 5 days, which are manageable, and they're not covering huge distances on any of those trips, except for the last one at the end of the season when they go to Nashville and St. Louis. But other than that, it's basically... Are
you on that trip?
I am on that trip.
Nashville in the spring, man. That must suck to be a hockey writer.
St. Louis is the one I'm really looking forward to. St. Louis in the spring will be... Anyway, but...
Come on, you're a baseball guy. Go watch the Canucks.
Yeah, I guess maybe we can make that work. Anyway. No, but the point is, the schedule has been a bit nuts. The fact they had all this time off in January, I think actually, was a bit of a boon to the team. They got to recover. A lot of the guys mentioned, Troy Stetcher mentioned, says, you guys don't really realize all the little injuries we have. This having a week off is going to be really big for our team getting healthy. I mean, they already finally were healthy before that, but in terms of the players who've been playing, it's a chance to recuperate. The output that's required every night from these guys, and to this date has been almost every other night, is huge. It's incredible. So the fact they actually get some time to recover, it is going to be a crazy March. It's going to be really tough. A lot of games. They're really going to be put to the test in terms of their depth, but I think it's going to be fun anyway. And it's not. I don't think it's going to be boring. We've got 25 days until the trade deadline. A lot of hockey to be played. We'll see how things play out. Playoff chases there, even if it is a bit of a turtle derby. It's going to be fun, I think.
It is going to be fun, especially just to have hockey back. It's
Yes,
been too long without it. So thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Mike Bell, for putting this together for us. Please download the videos, podcast, White Towel. You can subscribe through Apple Podcasts. We'd like you to listen and give us your input.